Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to recap with you where we are, where we've been, where we're going. So we've covered getting your head in the game, your role as a manager, managing from the middle, understanding yourself and others, working with people, building the team dynamic. And today we're going to talk about embracing the challenges, right? And that's change, difficult personalities or behaviors. And then tomorrow we're going to bring it all together and we'll have a little homework for tomorrow, nothing too bad, but we'll touch on that point towards the end of today. Okay. So yesterday we talked about teams, the Tuckman's life cycle of teams, and the characteristics of an effective team and situational leadership with a lens on teams. Today, we're going to look at embracing challenges. Not everything can be roses and rainbows. Many of you have experienced different things as in your management journey. And for those starting out, you will experience different things in your management journey. But today we're going to focus on identifying strategies to manage tricky situations and challenging behaviors, and then also explore practical approaches to managing change. Okay. So what does this all mean? Let me make sure my little chat is open so I can make sure I don't miss any messages. So managing people, whether as an individual or teams, it's hard. What makes it even harder is that your job as a manager is not just to manage your staff in the sense of minimizing challenging behaviors, is to actively work with each person's strengths and weaknesses or areas of improvement to help them grow and get the most out of them and help them reach their full potential. So yes, even with those people you just find it difficult to get along with, you have to work with them. You can't dismiss them and write them off, right? So the thing you need to ask yourself, is there such a thing as a difficult person? And I'm sure when I said difficult person, everybody had at least one person who came to mind, or several, whether it's at work or in your personal life. But the thing is that we can manage behavior. Like we talked about that onion model that we talked about, is we can change behaviors. So sometimes it's not the person, it's the behavior, and understanding why they're acting a certain way is the key, right? So I'm going to share with you, I'm going to do a little activity. These are the typical archetypes or behaviors that you find in the office, right? So thinking about your office, your team, your personal life, using the annotate tool, can you put a little stamp? So view more options, annotate stamps. Which is the behavior that you've seen the most in your organization, right? And this is the know-it-alls. Those are the ones that are typically arrogant and usually have an opinion for every issue. Okay. Then when there's wrong, they get very defensive. Then you have the passive. These are the people that never offer ideas or let you know where they stand. They're just floating by. Then you have the dictators. They're usually very strong, very opinionated. They intimidate some folks. They're consistently demanding and brutally critical. Then you have the yes people. They agree to any commitment, yet rarely deliver, right? So you can't trust them to follow through anything, but they'll volunteer probably for everything. Then you have the no people. They're quick to point out why something won't work and they're not flexible. And then you have the gripers. They're that anything is never right, everything is always wrong, but they never offer solutions. Okay, so these are the typical ones you find. So using your annotate, go under view, more options and stamps. Tell me which ones you've seen or are currently seeing in your teams, in your personal life, at work. We got some dictators going. right, so a lot of dictators, it seems like. Yeah. And also to add to this, I'm just going to mention Rob. One of the things that Rob had mentioned yesterday or the day before of things that we want to talk about is he mentioned the high performing toxic employee. Usually they're very bright, they're very smart individuals. They're probably subject matter experts and functional specialists, but their brilliance comes with a measure of toxicity, right? Which impacts the workplace and the team and the culture of the organization. So they're typically stepping on toes, they treat critics rudely, they violate team and individual trust, they bypass the chain of command, they alienate team members, and it really upsets people and bothers them along the way. So again, they're very brilliant, they're very smart. So one thing we need to remember as managers is that whether they're smart or not, in any of these archetypes, right, we cannot dismiss the concern and complaints from others about the toxic and disruptive behavior this one person is having in the team or the organization. Okay? We can't just rationalize their behavior as an excuse to treat them differently and then create two different levels of accountability. Because they're so amazing, we like their work, but they just don't have the personal skills, right? So as a manager for this type of individual, you must provide, with all of them, you must provide very clear, constructive behavioral feedback in a timely manner, offer timely, positive, and critical feedback, and importantly, work with an individual to define specific real-time behavior, right? How are they going to improve this behavior? Give them positive feedback when they are working or have improved in certain areas. Consider coaching. Sometimes people think coaching as a way of rewarding someone, but coaching sometimes is the additional investment that we want to take on some of our staff. You know, so not everyone have all the strengths. So there's some areas of improvement. And in this particular individual's case, a little bit of coaching could really help with some of that social aspect and how to properly work in a group setting. If you've also feel that you've invested time, energy, resources and giving feedback and coaching and nothing has changed, you should work with your upper management or HR, your human resources department, to develop an implementation and an escalation program. So this program may include a termination for non-compliance. So we can't be afraid to address behaviors that impact the organization and team, no matter how great the work of the person is, just bottom line. And know when enough is enough. When you've given enough training, when you've given enough support, when you've given enough resources for this individual to perform at their best, not only in how they're delivering their work, but how they're being part of the team, part of the organization, then you need to decide at what point is that enough and maybe come up with a performance improvement plan and possibly lead to separation. So as long as you've been fair to everyone, you've engaged, you deliberated a process, have documented the process, agreed on things that need to be worked on and improved, then it's possible that it might lead to separation if things don't change, but at least there's a plan and it's been communicated and you're treating everyone the same. Okay, so we cannot shy away from addressing these type of behaviors, and we have support. If you, in your case, if you have upper management can be a good sounding board or coach for yourself to help you through this process. And then your human resources department should be able to provide these tools and supports for these types of individuals. So I'm gonna move over here. So one thing that I also want to remember is that these archetypes of the stereotypes of people. And so not the whole truth of the picture. So someone that's a naysayer, someone that's toxic. So this is just a snippet, right? The reality is that people like to categorize. It's human nature for us to do that. But the danger is that when we categorize someone as difficult, we miss out on opportunities by writing them off. So the first thing we have to do if we're stuck is to shift our mindsets. There's no such thing as a problem person, only problem behaviors, right? And it's up to where's our line as an organization, as a manager, as an individual, or where we're gonna help coach, reinforce, and we've done everything we can. Where is that line for us, right? All problems are made and not born. So set of circumstances that have given rise to this behavior. What caused this behavior? All problem behaviors are either too much or too little of something. So what's this trigger that keeps happening? Problem behaviors have to be seen as situational unless it becomes a pattern, right? And then you address it with coaching and performance improvement plans. And different approaches are needed depending on if it's a one-off situation or if it's a habit. So if a one-off situation, show compassion, show support. How can you help address or help them support them through the situation? If it becomes a habit, explore with the individual what the impact is, what the consequences are, maybe come up with a performance improvement plan, talk to your human resources department, but invest the time to give it a fair chance and be fair and just, but speak about what are the outcomes and what are our expectations for this behavior or this habit to change. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen real quick so I can see all of you. So how do you, actually do this? So let's take the no, no, no archetype as an example. This is typically the risk adverse negative Nancy, right? Or negative Ned. Let's not make it a woman. Who shoots down all new ideas presented to them by their manager. So let's create a situation where you have a manager that loves new ideas and they have a team member who is a negative person and says, nope, that's not going to work. We can't do this. It's a bad idea. We don't have the time. We don't have the staff. We don't have any. So it's always no, 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 no. So what the manager could do, instead of labeling this person as difficult and not including this person in part of the planning of the team, they could choose to alter the perception of the problem. So they can actually reach out to this person probably a couple of days before, plant the seed of what they want to do. Hey, I'm thinking of, expanding this project into another country. And then the person starts, but no, and you can't do this. So then what happens is, that's okay. You tell them as a manager, we're going to talk about it on Thursday when we have our regular check-in, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. So what you're allowing there is for this negative Nancy or negative Ned to have a moment to simmer and sit with this information. Go through all their emotions of why not, why it can't be done. And then when you talk to them on Thursday or Friday, then they have the emotions are removed and now their true actions can be discussed. And you need that lens. You need that person to tell you why something may or may not work. So when you're trying to implement, you have a full picture of things that you need to strengthen or put into place before you carry out a scale up of a project. So you need that lens, but we need to remove the emotions out of it. So planting that seed with enough time allows that person to just deal with their emotions and then come back with some positive, constructive feedback for the work. Okay. I'm sure we also have family members that are the same, right? You have a family member that never has time or that can't do things. So what do? You plant a seed. Hey, we're thinking of going on vacation or we want to do this. And it gives them time to process, to go through their emotions of change, right? Change is coming, you're changing things up. And then they're able to then incorporate themselves to the plan. Okay? We all have someone like that. We all work with someone like that. So how do we switch that up and switch our mindset on how we approach them? Okay. So we're going to get into our groups right now for about 12 minutes. And in your group, you're going to pick one of the archetypes that we discussed of a difficult person. And it could be from the list that I shared on the slide. They're also going to be listed on your workbook on page 38. Or you can pick another personality that you're currently dealing with at work, okay, or at home. So consider the following questions. What are the potential consequences to do nothing as a manager? How could you alter the perception of the problem? How could you influence the person to change their behavior? And how could you modify the situation? Okay. And keep this in mind, you can do these things even when you're not a formal manager. So you don't have to be someone's direct supervisor to kind of tailor and modify how you communicate and have them invest and contribute to the group. Right? So Marinda is going to work her magic. We're going to work on page 38 of your workbook, and she's going to put you in groups and we'll reconvene in 12 minutes. Okay.
Okay, perfect. There you go.
See you all soon.
Okay, right. I'm just going to put you in the waiting room.
Welcome back, everyone. So what group wants to share? Was there any light bulb moments or key points you talked about that you don't want your other colleagues to miss? Was there a personality that you talked about that was not on the list and you brought in a new personality to talk about? And it's day 7. You should not be shy at this point.
We didn't talk about this personality, but it is one that I observe sometime. And I don't know quite how you would describe it, but it's a person who divides the group, who, goes outside of the process and builds alliances that undermine the team in a way that is not helpful. Who, when the meeting is over, has the separate meeting in the parking lot,
Yeah.
When after you think you've come to the decision, and all of a sudden, you've got a faction, it factionalizes people.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly where that is. It's partially a griper, and sometimes it's a know-it-all, but
Right.
it's a behavior that is really not helpful.
And also, if it's related to change, there could be considered an active resistor. Because that's what we're going to talk about that in a moment.
The saboteur.
Yes, the active resistor is very vocal and will start trying to get people to align with them, right? Because they want to disrupt and they don't want that change to happen. They don't want to deal with that. So that is definitely a problem. Look, like anything, I would say, Rob, or to anyone, it's like, it's a behavior and that needs to be addressed. Because what happens is that if we gloss over it, it's setting bad precedent for others and they're going to think that that type of behavior is allowed. And B, it's just going to be so disruptive to the work environment, regardless of whether the product of their work is good. So that also needs to be coached and counseled, because what's probably happened, depending on their years of experience in the field, they've gotten by. No one's addressed it. So they think it's okay to act this way, right? So if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt and you really want to invest and you really want it to get addressed, you have to address it and have an honest conversation during your check-ins, during performance evaluations, and say, look, it's really undermining when we're agreeing something in the meeting, especially if they're part of leadership or we're part of this team, and then you come in with like a backup plan. I'd rather you talk to me about some of your concerns so that we can help address them together and then address it to the group, right? Because if you don't address this behavior, honestly, it's just opening up that can for other type of behaviors, because people are gonna be like, oh, that's allowed. It's not easy. It really isn't. Those are very difficult conversations. But again, we're trying to correct a behavior. And if we've coached, if we've counseled, if we provided additional training and support, then the next thing is that, you know what? You're continuing to be a toxic or impeding the growth of this team, and it's impacting the work. Because behaviors eventually impact the work. So then how does HR get involved? What is a performance plan, right? So definitely I would say address it. Again, it's hard, but if it's not addressed, it could open up other problems within the organization. Because then when you're also trying to grow and you're trying to do that change, it's going to be so challenging and more things are going to come up. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that, because I think sometimes you don't talk about those people. We kind of also dismiss, oh, that's just them. It's like, no, that's not okay. Why can't we have nice, productive, cohesive work environments? You know what I mean? Like, it's not too hard to ask, but again, we have a lot of personalities. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments on some of these situations? You want to share something that's happening at work? You don't have to name names, please don't. We'll protect the innocent. But I just really want to get your thoughts, because we deal with these situations all the time. And I really want you to verbalize how it's been for you, or just share your experience so that we can really learn from each other.
I'm happy to go.
Please.
So we talked about the know-it-alls,
Mhm.
and we had 2 people on our group who dealt with know-it-alls, but not in a management position. With one, it was someone junior, and with one, it was someone senior, which, you know, obviously made it harder. But we talked about the fact that we think a lot of times that comes from a place of insecurity, the know-it-all. And so it's important to acknowledge, you know, they are doing good work, or we really do value you as a team member. But, you know, when you do X, Y happens, or, you know, other people, this is how the team's being affected by it. And we really focused on the sort of first part of the know-it-all, which is they have an opinion about everything. We got towards the end, and Netta was starting to talk about the piece about when they're wrong, they get really defensive, which I don't think we sort of dove into as much. So we didn't talk about that piece, but it's important to address too.
Exactly. Remember, you know, not having people be accountable, right, or doing their piece of the work, it's a dysfunction of a team. So those know-it-alls that I'm providing constructive feedback doesn't allow your team also to grow, right? You're not going to go through the stages of a team. It creates some dysfunction. So how do we address it? And it's about the tone and the manner that then you as a manager can lead and clear those expectations and those one-on-one coachings or those one-on-one sessions to hear what's going on with them, what questions they may have about the work, or just what's happening. So then we can anticipate and see what may be triggering for this individual. You know, what some things may be out of character for some folks as well. So the need to recognize this behavior, that is, you know, your job as a manager, or part of the job as a manager, to do everything in your power to try to mitigate a problem before it happens. So knowing your staff, what motivates them, what they're going through, right? Helps you understand how that situation is going to affect your team dynamics or the work. And we can plan, we can help, we can support, and not be reactive as much as possible, right? Some staff doesn't want to talk. So we can only do so much, and we can only help when we have information to help. But allowing that space and giving them space in a group setting or one-on-one is important. So you need to understand also when the situation becomes a performance issue, and I can't stress this enough. We can't just turn a blind eye. When it starts becoming a performance issue, then HR needs to be involved, a performance plan needs to put into place. We need to document, because eventually if things don't change, that will need to lead to a separation. Either the staff person will leave or they need to be asked to leave. That's just what happens. Hopefully we don't get there, right? So we try to mitigate, be proactive, not reactive, and understand our teams and our staff. So that's just personalities to do work, right? And just the team dynamics. But how about, you know, change? When you add change to someone that is already feeling these feelings, that has this type of personality. So let's try a little experiment. So if everyone can turn on their cameras, if you can, for a moment, we're gonna try a little experiment. All right. So I want everyone to do something very simple, super simple. Cross your arms. Just cross your arm. That feels good, right? That's comfortable. You know how to do it, right? Now switch it. Switch the other arm. Whatever arms you have to switch it. How does that feel? Some people turn back and put it back the old way. It's uncomfortable. Like, where does this hand go? I'm like, why is it in my armpit? Like, it's just like, what's happening, right? So this is how people react to change. It's uncomfortable. They don't know what to do with themselves. Some people revert back to the old way because that's comfortable. So how do we help our teams navigate through this? So I'm going to share with you 7 dynamics of how your team react to change. Okay, so we're going to talk about the 7 dynamics of change and the process of change for a team. So we have to remember that change is doing something new and people may show discomfort. As a leader, you should acknowledge the feelings and share how you feel about the change as well without oversharing, because you're also, remember, in a position of leadership within your organization. So you're not going to gripe about everything that you feel is wrong. You can acknowledge, yeah, this is going to be challenging, or yeah, it may require a little more work for us at the beginning, but it's really going to pay off. So I understand how you're feeling. I get your concern, right? Remember also that it's human nature to have an initial reaction of change as a personal loss. Individuals need a chance to mourn the feelings, right? You're shifting their reality, their status quo, so they need to deal with that. So as a leader, you need to acknowledge the loss, but later ask what they may gain from it. Help them see the benefit or help them move to a more productive next step, right? Together. Again, it's also human nature to have the why me attitude. As a leader, you can create opportunities for people to talk and see that they aren't alone. Everyone feels the same way, or everyone seems a level of frustration, but we're going to work through this together. And as much as you can, only tackle one change at a time. Some people can't handle too many things. If you're trying to change policies, if you're changing leadership, if you're changing multiple things in the organization, it might be too much, depending on the change, right? And also some people may be more excited about change than others, because others will resist it. And as a manager, avoid labeling employees as resistant to meet them. So meet them where they are, at their level of readiness for the change, and guide them through the process. Create those opportunities, okay? Acknowledge the fact that change may have on them, on their resources, on their workload, and have a planning session. So if this change now, or losing someone in the team, which happens to us all the time, someone is leaving unexpectedly, and we have a really full work plan happening. So let's meet about it. Yeah, so-and-so leaving, great for them. It's gonna be time consuming and horrible for us for a moment. We're gonna try to hire as quickly as possible, but how can we divide the work and conquer? Or how can we reprioritize now that we're down one person in the team? Planning is important, because what you don't want is them to feel that now I'm the only one being impacted, nobody cares. So then it starts building these feelings of resentment, right? And possibly passive aggressiveness, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So as a manager, you need to make it clear that there's no going back also to the old way. So people don't revert back to the old behaviors, right? Kind of what Rob was saying, have that closure moment of the old and then re-engage with the new. This is our new vision. This is our new outlook. This is the new project. We've learned from the old, and this is a 2.0 version, right? New and improved. So what we were saying with change or approaching change is a loss to some folks. And so I wanted to introduce you the model of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross created this model in 1969, and it was originally designed for bereavement, so for someone losing someone. So it might sound dramatic for some of you, that someone may feel like, anyone could feel like they've lost someone or they're grieving, since we're talking about change in the workplace, but change can feel like a personal loss to some people. And it can trigger the same emotions and patterns as bereavement does. So Kubler-Ross provides us the change curve, and many will be familiar with this as a model, as an experience. So look here through the different levels that we have. So there's shock, right? They can't believe it. There's denial, there's frustration, there's depression, there's experimenting, there's decision and integration. So let's use this example. You give someone a new task. They're in shock. They're like, why am I giving this task? I don't want to do it. I'm already have a lot going on my to-do list. Why am I doing this? They're surprised that you put them in that situation. They avoid doing the task. That's the denial. Because they don't want to deal with it. You asking them for an update starts getting them frustrated because you're expecting them to do the task that they're not wanting to do. Then they have low morale. That's the depression piece. They aren't motivated. They don't want to do it. They don't want to do anything. They finally get to the task and begin experimenting. And then hopefully they come to terms and decide that the task isn't so bad. Right? So they experiment and they make a decision, you know what, it wasn't so bad after all. And then they go behind, they begin to have a decision or integration stage. But then they complete the task and they understand what the work that you're trying them to do. Same process. It could be with a task, it could be with an organizational change, a new strategic plan, business development opportunities, if you're going and pivoting into a new direction, the countries that you may be working in, it could be anything. Changes in the team. You know, sometimes one person leaving a team that had a lot of relationships in the organization can affect the dynamics and could be a moment of loss in the organization as well. So think of how to approach some of this by being proactive, by talking to them, creating a place for them to express themselves, everything we talked about before, and then linking it to how it would help them and help their work and the organization. So let's meet some archetypes associated with change. We're only going to talk about 4. We're going to talk first about the passive change resistor, right? They are individuals who are silent about their views or appear to agree with the change, but don't act on them. It means the threat that this change presents is something they want to move away from or hide from in hopes that it passes by without affecting them, right? That denial piece. So don't assume silence, it's acceptance. Your goal with this type of personality is to make sure that they don't create their own fears by imagining negative impacts from the change. So again, creating that space for them to speak, creating one-on-one sessions if they don't like, they're not comfortable with group sessions, or putting out a survey for the organization or the team. Things where they can engage and verbalize some of their concerns. The next one is active change resistor. These are individuals who speak and act against the change to negatively influence others to also resist. So they want their allies and they want everyone to also be as vocal about the change as they are. So like passive resistance, this behavior is triggered by feeling threatened, right? That's the core. How is this going to impact me? Why is this affecting me? It means this change has triggered a very specific threat that they want to eliminate. And their active resistance is an attempt to reassert some loss of autonomy. I control the situation because I am going to make sure I get allies and we're going to be vocal about not doing this. So be aware how the change may make people feel threatened. So explore the situation together, try to address it and not have it linger. You might even consider that if change is coming and you already know this personality is in the team, speaking to them first, giving them the opportunity to process their emotions about this upcoming change, but including them in the process or making them feel included before you also disseminate the information to the rest of the team. Then we have the passive change acceptors. They go along with the change. They aren't vocal about it. So they normally get the least attention, and you will you will need to make an effort to not let them feel forgotten during the change. Because they could be probably persuaded the other way, right? If that active resistor comes in and starts building those ideas on them and says no and no, if those passive receptors are not giving a space to also be part of the process or talk to, they could also switch their perspective. Okay. And then you have the active change acceptors. They are very vocal about their support. They're your cheerleader. They're also the person you want to talk to at the beginning because they'll help bring everyone along and try to have buy-in at different levels. So if you encourage them, they can make them move the team forward. So when you're thinking of change, when you're trying to change a strategic plan, the vision of the organization, or make some management changes, I would say it's really good to identify the person that has some, that would be your active change acceptor, right? Because you're gonna want them to be excited about the change and also be vocal about it and start bringing everyone along and bringing them in, right? You might wanna also think about having someone, or one-on-one sessions would be the active resistor, to start planting the seed that the change is coming. Give them a chance to simmer it down and then work with them. Okay? So again, being proactive and thinking what is gonna help smooth the process of change as much as possible. You can't control everyone, but you can put things in place to try to make it as smooth as possible. Remember, just like anything, change, you're not gonna please everyone, but you could do the best you can for most. Okay. Any thoughts or comments? We're gonna have a little working group session about these 4 different types of stakeholders of change. Any questions or comments before we move into the groups? I must say, we've been a quiet bunch these last 2 days, but that's okay. It's a lot of information. All right, so we are gonna get into groups for about 11 minutes or so. And we're gonna use page 39 of your workbook. And in your groups, you're gonna discuss the different archetypes that we just covered about change. So your group, you will be put in groups of active acceptors, active resistor, passive acceptor, and passive resistor. And you will discuss what are the typical characteristics, how do they tend to behave or operate, what's good or bad about this type of personality or change trait, and what's helpful and not helpful about this. And is there something there to be managed, and how? How would you manage this type of personality during change? Okay. Miranda's gonna work her magic, and then she's also gonna give us the name of at least one person in each team, so you know that if you're with that person, you're in that team. If not, you can look at the top of your Zoom breakout room, and they will tell you the group name. Okay. If you have extra time, you can pick another archetype. But if not, we will see you in 11 minutes. Go ahead, Miranda, work your magic.
Okay, perfect. So room 1 is active acceptors. Room 2 is active resistors. Oh, sorry. Room 1 is Angela and Jennifer's group. Room 2 is active resistors, and that's Christine and Diego's group. Room 3, passive acceptors, is Amber and Laura's group. And then the last group, passive resistors, is Moses and Nada's group. All right, let's go.
See you soon. Wonderful. All right. Thank you all for coming back. We're gonna debrief a little bit on each of these groups. So who had the active acceptors? Who was in that active acceptor group?
My group had that.
Hi.
Hello.
Share with us some key things that are helpful.
Yeah, we kind of talked about this group being sort of go-getters often, and very excited and receptive to change and kind of thrive on it. Whereas resistors may not love that as much. We kind of also talked about how they could be sort of Pollyanna types, like may not be like thinking about the more the harder things about a change, which can be good and, bad but often they're like a very positive energy on a team. And then we talked about for like things to manage, that sometimes an active acceptor they're often like getting things thrown at them because people know that they'll actively accept, and they can get burnt out by that. So that's kind of something to be mindful of as you manage a person on a team that you're aware of is more of an active acceptor type.
Awesome. Great, thank you, Joanne. How about the active resistors? Who wasn't active?
Diego, do you want to? I can start if you want to join in on it. So the active resistor is, it's the individual that that's vocal in opposition frequently. We talked about how it's often a person that won't necessarily suggest sort of constructive ideas, rather it's just sort of actively vocal in opposing any kind of change. And then can sometimes we think also kind of rev up people around them. So that energy can sort of spread to other members of the team, which just kind of can also create sort of a difficult situation in a toxic environment. So, one of the, unlike what we were talking about with sort of the passive resistor is, we do think that there's some clear management approaches that they would be responsive to, because they operate in a really direct way. Sort of manager could, very directly say, either like, we hear you on, your concerns about this, but now that we've discussed this, this is how we're proceeding, and there won't be any further discussion. Or, could even directly address them about the tendency to sort of complain or object just too much. So we think that person would respond typically well to that. Yeah, I don't know, Diego or anyone else on the team, on the group, if you had anything else.
Yeah, we just said that, trying to look at the good and the bad of this personality is that you always know where they stand, because they're so vocal, and they can sometimes provide reasonable objections to too much change in the organization. You need people that will speak out when too much change is going on. And in that fashion, also, they can vocalize for others that won't say anything, like the passive resistors. So, and the other thing that's good is that they give you perspective, right? Because whenever something new is going to be implemented, you want to take a, what are the advantages of the change? What are the advantages of not changing? And hearing both sides is an important thing to do when determining the best path forward. So getting to hear that, the other side is good.
Perfect. That's your negative Nancy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you both. How about passive acceptors?
I can share some notes on that one. So we identified some of the characteristics really as someone who's maybe disengaged, quieter, kind of sitting on the sidelines, and might not proactively contribute to discussion. They might wait to see what others on the group say before sharing an opinion. And so on the downside of that is really that you're potentially lacking valuable inputs and insights from this person who's not really contributing. And on the positive side, and this maybe is linked to how you manage them, the process of trying to engage those people and get them talking and get them sharing their thoughts, you can eventually maybe bring out their inputs and help elevate their inputs in the group. The other positive that we potentially identified is if there's a group where there's a lot of active acceptors and a lot of active resistors, you might not need everyone to be very loudly and vocally taking a side, because there could be more conflict or more toxicity that comes in there. Maybe it's appropriate to have some more passive acceptors. And then for management, again, it was coming back to this idea of really engaging them to understand their perspective, asking them what they think, asking them how they feel, and making sure to get their inputs possibly in advance in smaller group discussions, offering some other ways for them to contribute. But I'd be curious if anyone else in my group has anything I missed. Feel free to jump in.
Seems like you did amazing, Amber. Thank you. How about the passive resistors? Who was in that group?
I could do this one. So we talked about the passive resistors being some characteristics we used were maybe dishonest, but we also used introverted. Maybe they are like, they don't feel empowered or encouraged to speak up or something, and that's why they're passively resisting, not actively resisting. And we said that it could be helpful if we're able to like figure out why they're resisting, to hear those reasons, and maybe that'll make our decision or our change stronger by incorporating things that we may have missed. But it could also be unhelpful because they could be resisting without us even knowing it and undermining the decision that we're trying to make. And for managing it, the thing that we thought would manage it is having conversations with the passive resistors about why they're resisting something, whether that's privately or during the meeting, asking or giving them the opportunity to voice those concerns, and trying to figure out what those reasons are and see if those can, if there can be like some sort of next step or resolution or something from that.
Yeah, so one thing to acknowledge, thank you so much, Nita, is that passive resistors could be a very dangerous, archetype to work with, right? Because they can easily be dismissed. So I think it's important, same thing with what Nita was saying, they need to be acknowledged, right? Our energy most of the time is easily drawn to active archetypes, right? To the people that are actively cheerleading or actively against something. We normally need the passive personalities to just be. So we cannot ignore them though, especially through this movement of change, because they can easily be either undermining or be turned to undermine because they're not being addressed or engaged. So do not ignore the passive personalities. Understand where they are, what their concerns might be, how can they be part of that change process. And some of them may not be comfortable speaking in a group setting, so those one-on-one sessions may be more productive to speaking to this type of personality or individual. Okay. So I do want to share some tips just to reiterate some of the things we've been talking about, is that, when you're implementing change, don't assume you know where they are in the change process, right? Let them move step by step, so meet them where they're at. Try to minimize the sharing of negativity. Make sure that when you're having sessions, they're healthy sessions to voice opinions and concerns, and it doesn't become a complaining session because that's counterproductive, right? If it does, redirect. Recognize where we'll be lost or how people are going to be impacted by this change, but emphasize the benefits and the values, how that's going to take the organization to the next level, or is going to take the team to the next level, or make things easier, right? Manage expectations. right? Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So the change usually is going to be in phases, or it's going to be take a couple, months or living with this new process to really see the benefits or for things to flow out smoothly. So manage those expectations. And also remember that individuals are the ones to change, not the organization. Because the organization already has a plan. That's where they're going. So we need to help move the individuals along through that change. Okay? So it's very important when you're doing, again, organizational changes, or you're going to shift a lot of things in the organization, that you have planning sessions, you have strategy sessions, so that you're capturing people's voices before the change is rolled out. So by the time the change is being rolled out, people have had a time to process and anticipate and can predict what's going to happen or know about the change. And then we have a rollout plan for the change, whether it's in phases or in stages, but at least people were already part of the process and are included. So buy-in, conversations, opinions happen before the change is implemented. It's part of the change process, especially if you're doing organizational changes. Very important. Okay. Tomorrow, we are going to be, I'm just sharing my screen so I can see you all. Tomorrow, we are going to bring it all together. Okay, so there's a little homework. If you can, two things. One, for tomorrow, come with a medium-sized challenge that you're currently facing that we can help you and have like a little coaching session. And then reread the case study from day one about Jane. Now that we have all these tools in our toolbox, we're really going to put together how we're going to help Jane with all those issues that she has. Okay. I do want to remind everyone that these recordings are available within 24 hours. So this recording will be available by tomorrow morning or tomorrow your time. And then you'll be able to access the coursework or the materials for another week so until next Friday, because the class ends tomorrow. So if you have any questions, you need to download any materials, go ahead and do that over the weekend or next week, but make sure you do it before next Friday. Okay. So in the chat, I want to hear from you. What is one new way you will approach a management challenge differently? You need a moment to think about that. That's a very loaded word or question, actually. You can turn off your cameras, but I want us to close out with that question being answered. What is one way that you will approach management challenge differently? And you could just drop that in the chat, or you could open your mic. Up to you. Be more proactive in addressing active resistors. Yes. Be more aware what archetype people fall into so that I can modify my behavior, how I manage them. Yes, so taking that time to find reflection, to plan is very important and is part of your to-do list and your tasks, not in addition to. Take a more considered approach to understanding the characteristics of individuals I manage and how to respond accordingly. Exactly. Know your team, right? Know the people in your team. That's really what it boils down to. Who's working with you? How do you need to approach them? How do they like to learn? All these things that we've been covering. Know your team. Okay? Understand the same approach won't work for everyone. 100%. 100%. And not one situation is the same. You could take some lessons learned, right? But not one situation in management is going to be the same. Awesome. Wonderful. Okay. So that's everyone's sharing. So go through the workbook as well. If there's other things you want to explore or have questions about, we can talk about it tomorrow as well. But if there's no other questions or comments, we'll reconvene again tomorrow. We will start on time because we do have a few things to cover as part of the review and then doing the hands-on pieces. So unless there's anything else, we will see you all tomorrow. Thank you all so much.